And welcome to this fine day in September. I appreciate everybody being here. As you may be aware from the syllabus, this is our book, can be used through 2026, which makes it very economical. And it is a bargain. Many things that have, shall we say, age on them do. And this definitely has lots of age. I believe it was printed 8th edition in 2001, so virtually a quarter of a century. So, but the volumes are there for the purchase, and it is quite entertaining. And you will have many trees, genealogical charts, not like an arbor, but it is definitely, you will see that we have a lot of that and interesting illustrations. Lacey Baldwin Smith and his wife were both historians at Seattle for many years, and so I highly recommend it for you. The title I chose, of course, is somewhat transitional because technically, as all Shakespearean lovers will know, the Lancastrians are merely a branch of the Plantagenets because it's all part of the same family. You got to have some connection to the Plantagenets in order to become king. It may not be the best claim, but if you have an army and you have other means, it can help. So all of this then is to say Richard II, as we all know from Shakespeare, died in less than pleasant circumstances at a relatively young age in 1399, as Frank pointed out, under somewhat mysterious circumstances, melancholia. And he may have also had some dietary issues and in starvation. But all of that is to say, ratemymonarch.com, it would have been 1 star if that. And on we go to Henry IV, of whom many will know from various historical series, from plays to movies to television series and beyond. This period of the 15th, 16th century is enormously popular with audiences. They really, really are, even if they haven't had the benefit, as you will, of studying it in a classroom context. I've always been amazed by that. And novels, some of them that would not be fitting for you because they are they're lurid, to use a word not used so much anymore, but it's true. Now, these are merely general areas of concern I want you to know. There's so many other social and economic issues which would be interesting, and I can push the book again. You can get more detail on all of this and more of the economics and the development of, shall we call it the middle class? Because in the classes there was got the rise of the gentry. You know, the people, you're not aristocrats, but you're not peasants. And so you get more and more important during this period. All of this is to say that it's also an era, as we always love in history, era of transition. And if you live through a period that's not transition, you be sure and let me know, because it seems that in history, at least in my history, there's always been transition. All of that is to say that this one is particularly transitional. Black Death will do that for you. This frightening, at least if you had been a landowner, of the peasants' revolt. And just as we might even say, even if we say, well, it wasn't that big, big enough, it gets people excited to know these things can happen. So between the Black Death, which makes reappearances as plagues do, plus the possibility of continuing revolts of people who have been kept in subservience for centuries, plus, can we really be sure about the monarchy? Remember, people of the day would have heard about a monarch being deposed and then passing on. You say, well, I know about that from another Shakespeare play. Yeah, you do and I do, Edward II. But they didn't have all the media opportunities to speculate about the lurid details of that going on, or confidential, or, inquiring minds want to know, all of that. All we know is that there is a lot of issue with how is the monarch going to last. Well, Edward III lasted a long time, didn't he? I mean, if you were doing kings, you think, oh, he made it 50 years. And that's very impressive. Edward III, that was during the 14th century. He didn't die until 1377. And he became king when his father died in 1327. You don't have to know dates. I'm just noting, you think, oh, I bet everybody was exciting. There was a big party to celebrate the 50th anniversary. No, that was not the case. Sometimes one can be king too long. Just the idea, though, of instability, because after him comes the unfortunate Richard II, his grandson, 1377 to 1399. Wars, well, I mean, wars are not unknown to us today, but they are particularly significant in terms of this period because of the 100 Years' War. Those mischievous Scots, we always have problems with them if we're English. And those darn Welsh, we thought we had them down in the 13th century, and here they are still cutting up. So, in other words, from colonialism to at least a temporary halt in the Anglo-French business, because this will come back and haunt us. And then, of course, as I will go into detail next week, we have religious issues with something that may have had to do with academics getting together in the coffee room and arguing about how true is the Bible and that darn Pope. Why do we have to have all that? And you say, you better keep it quiet. I mean, they didn't have tenure, but still, I don't think this is something you would want to get out. But the idea of ecclesiastical issues. Remember, some of you heard me speak of having two popes, as in, will the real Pope please stand up? It's like this was a very difficult time for believers, wouldn't you think? I mean, like, what if I'm wrong? Could I change my mind later and say, I was just kidding? You understand this is very complicated to have two or even three popes. And as much as I'd love to get into it, just be aware that it's going to be significant, even though I would think if you supported the Pope that was not accepted in your neck of the woods, that would be troubling. I mean, you couldn't say, well, in that neighborhood, they support this Pope. But as for me and my family, we're for this. No, we're down the line. Scotland, they're all going to hell. So they're supporting the wrong Pope, like those blankety blank French. It's a very tricky business. You take my Pope, I'm king, you're not. But all of this is to say, as I call it euphemistically, issues. So it's an exciting time that we will be dealing with this period. And there's our little Richard. Children are cute, aren't they? He's a cute little 10-year-old. And you say, gee, I understand because I had addition. So you're thinking he didn't live that long. No, he did. And I was looking at the dates of people back then. Life was very short. As they always say, we sometimes forget how fortunate we are to live now. In any event, thanks to his father's death, and he, of course, being the famous Black Prince, Richard was the heir to the throne. Was this a mistake? I'm sure it was. But legally speaking, he was a male and he was of the blood of the grandson of the last king and the only surviving son of his father, the Black Prince. So his mother, who was actually his father's first cousin, they didn't worry about DNA. That was not an issue. It was a political matter, and she obviously was very involved in her son's reign until she remarried, had another career going on, and of course, more importantly, his uncle, whom we know so well, John of Gaunt, so called because he was born in Ghent, because of his mother's background, Ghent, Gaunt. And he was a person of great interest, very great interest. And, it was an old song. It could have been me. It's like you go to somebody's wedding and, and all of that dribble romantic stuff. John of Gaunt probably walked around his nephew and was thinking, it could have been me. I should have been king. But he got the next best thing. It's like, oh, Uncle John, do you think this is a good decision? Or, it's like that. It's like you can be very paternalistic. But John of Gaunt had plenty going on for himself. He was a Lancastrian that he inherited as a result of marriage. Now, many of you will remember I've been over this before. This is basically a review for those who are new to our assemblage. I first tried to say something nice about Richard. When you're going to be ugly about people, don't you want to build it up and say, well, he loved his family. Yeah, I know. So you say, he really loved his wife and mother. Yeah. This is all about Hallmark, isn't it? Yes, those cards would go out regularly. Mom, you're just the greatest. And he had lots of friends. He was good to his friends, leading him to some very unfortunate errors, because sometimes we can develop relationships with people who are not good for us. And that was definitely his problem. Because, of course, in doing this, I guess he got tired of having so many uncles. Edward III had lots of sons. And the result would be that they expected to basically run things while little Eddie was growing up. And Edward wanted to run things with his buddies. And they were not, I want to call them self-made men. It's not like I was brought up in a log cabin and now I'm the. No, it wasn't that. It's just that they had not been at the top, and thanks to their relationship to Richard, they were now in positions of prestige. And the king's so-called natural advisors would have been unnatural for Richard, because he didn't like people telling him what to do. Not just when you're 10, not just when you're 14, but all along. Was he what we would call having arrested development or immature? Maybe, but it's not because John of Gaunt wasn't there with him. And as long as John of Gaunt, it's sort of like we talked today about, as long as you're under 21, you have to do this, that, and the other. It was part that, but part because they had a close relationship, I'd say, of uncle and nephew. But Richard had problems. Maybe the people loved him. Remember during the riots way back when, and he went out among the people. Of course, the massacre of the peasants afterwards may not have enhanced his reputation, but there you are. He needed money, don't they all? Yes. Have you ever found a ruler who said, shucks, I'll just do without, y'all just enjoy yourself? So yes, of course, he was getting money as hard as he could go. And how can you get money more easily if you are king than getting married? So his first and actually happy marriage to the daughter of a Holy Roman Emperor, sounds mighty nice, had yielded both happy marriage and probably a nice dowry. But now he needed another dowry after his wife died. So, in gaining a truce in his war in France, he remarried. With the marriage, of course, will come lots and lots of, as we say now, euros, I guess. But your wife is going to be 7 years old. So, and now she's got some growing up, and there's an age gap, but we've got time, so he thinks. So, regardless of the growing up, and there's going to be a special chest that comes with her with that money, because he needs it, because you know why he needs it. It's like, so we don't have to ask for any. The money just keeps coming in. And when it comes in, I won't need you anymore, you nobles, because I don't like you. It's like passive resistance, that kind of thing. So, John of Gaunt finally takes off on one of his own campaigns. To make it as brief as I can, his second wife had claims to the throne of Castile. So he was thinking, wow, this would be very exciting. And the king is growing up. He's a big boy now. So I think that would be fun to go down to Iberia and work on this campaign. In the event, it didn't work. So, but John of Gaunt, it's like you have projects and areas that you're interested in. So this is before there was Spain, that didn't occur in the 15th century. So Castile had its own crown, and they had a tendency to marry English monarchs. So that's how he had those claims. You say, well, I wonder if he loved this wonderful Castilian bird. I don't know about that, but it did give him that claim, and he was involved in that. So why this is important is during this period, which is in the 1390s, they will use the occasion, they being the nobles, to try to get back power from a king they were growing to loathe. He was in his 20s, and he had been difficult. And basically, during this time, they decide in this so-called wonderful parliament, and it doesn't mean wonderful like you are, great people like you're wonderful. It means you're full of wonder. And that's not good, because it doesn't mean awesome. It just means full of wonder. Really? That kind of thing, which is not complimentary. So the wonderful parliament basically begins the process of impeaching and convicting. Michael de la Pole was, what would you say, sycophant? The king had built him up. They sometimes call him kisser or liquor. We know people of this sort, not people you would know perhaps, but I've encountered them. As the student in an early class of mine came to my office and said, "My, these books look so interesting." And I said, "Really? You can do better than that." So you understand, licking doesn't always work. Somebody can be on to you, but the idea is in this wonderful parliament, de la Pole, who was a made man, he was what we call the well-to-do family, but not the high nobility. And king had put him in, and with John of Gaunt, boy, those nobles who controlled Parliament put him up there. And he was convicted. Both impeachment and conviction. And of course, that ended in a very, very serious I mean, what were they going to do to him? He made it to France. So, unlike some, he got his life, but he lost power. Meanwhile, in the very end of this period, John of Gaunt came home, and he was in very poor health. And at this time, when the king more or less did not have any controls on him, the so-called merciless parliament allowed these individuals, lords appellants, they are major nobles. And basically, they accuse the royal government of not respecting their rights. When I was a boy, I thought the word appellant had to do with making appeals in court. But this is a bit different. the idea of appellant here is I'm accusing people in the royal government. Mind you, I'm not accusing the king. We love the king. The king's wonderful. But we accuse people who are part of the king's government. Very careful here. All of this is going to not go over well with Richard II because he clearly knows what's going on. He's young. He's irritated. He doesn't like these people. Many of them, remember, would have been a part of his family reunion because all of them are part and parcel of these very fruitful Plantagenets. Remember, they have lots and lots of kinfolks, as we're going to see on some trees coming up. But among those who are these lords appellant are our man of today. Yes, you can call him Henry IV, but we can also know him as Henry Bolingbroke. Very, very significant person. He was the son of John of Gaunt, and as such, the heir to all of the Lancastrian properties. And you say, well, big deal. Yes, it's a very big deal to be the heir to the Lancastrian lands, as we're about to see. And it's very ironic because Richard and this Henry were little boys together. You look at pictures and you say they're Beulah Elementary, and you think, I was cute then and they were cute then, and maybe we played tag together, and that kind of hopscotch. I don't know. Whatever it is, that is exactly the irony here. But when we get older, sometimes these kinds of little relationships sour. What do you think? He resented that the king had taken away his father, Uncle John. I am not practicing without a license, so I can't examine the psychology of this, but I can tell you this. He doesn't like what's happening to the lands. Why? Because he wants them. What happened, in essence, by the king's action was to say, and again, John of Gaunt is on his deathbed. Oh, believe me, he'd had a good life. And he was now in his 60s. Gosh. So, yeah, poor thing. Yeah, barely. But the idea is, by this point, Richard was becoming what you might say berserk. If it had medicines back then, maybe he could have gotten some help, because he would be part of an effort to canonize Edward II, his great-great-grandfather, who had had an unfortunate end. And canonization, we just had one Sunday, and it's a big deal. Edward II, problematic. But if you have the right funds provided to certain electors, maybe it can work out. But why Edward II would be a fitting object for canonization is anyone's guess. But you don't really ask about a king's wishes. You just do it if you want to get that raise. Meanwhile, he thought he could be elected Holy Roman Emperor if the price is right. German king. I mean, you're thinking, really? Why? Well, he had the money from the dowry. And he is just about messed up. One thing he needs to do, though, with John of Gaunt on his deathbed, he says, that cousin Henry is really obnoxious. He had sent him into exile. Then he says, I thought it would be just 10 years till he learned to behave himself, but I'm just going to make it permanent. Then I'll take all the lands. I'm going to tell you that was all it took for Bolingbroke. You can mess with me, but don't mess with my lands, or else there'll be trouble. And there was. In 1399, Henry Bolingbroke, young man, he was in France, and then he got word that his father had died. And he also got word, you won't need to go home. We've already had the funeral. We thought about you, and our thoughts are with you. Or all that. There'll be an arrangement from FTD. It left for you. I mean, it's like, really? But what about all my land? Oh, yeah. That's not going to happen. But enjoy Paris. I love Paris. That. So think, because you're not coming back. You know why? Because you're a loser. And I'm King Richard II, and you're not. Well, boy, howdy. That's when Henry comes back. And it's doomsday for Richard. Richard had somewhat oddly been off on a campaign in Ireland, fighting the Irish. And when he gets back, he finds there is a sort of coup going on. And it is very, very odd that he is escorted, the king, as he was, escorted to the Tower of London. I guess they have a royal suite there if you ever visit the Tower. The royal suite, he checks in. Sort of like they would say, like Sheriff Hotshot, you check in, but you never check out. And it's like he checked in to the royal suite, but he's never going to come out alive because Henry realizes, I want to get my lands, but then if I'm getting my lands, why not go for all of it? It's like Richard is so obnoxious. He's really in the way. And I'm sure his cronies are saying, you're so right, sir. People will tell you a lot when they want something. Just remember that. Kicklighter's principles of leadership. Yeah, watch out. So, somehow during a visit from royal support staff to Richard II in the Tower of London, they're not saying, sir, I hope your accommodations are okay. Would you like to call room service? Can your valet bring you something? The way you would expect from your fancy hotels, because you're not staying at Days Inn or somewhere. I thought not. Yes. You upper crust, you're staying at fancy places. Can you imagine, though, the king in the Tower may have encouraged what we would call steps for dieting by King Richard. And as he was dieting, he may have encouraged Richard, you know, your record at King has not been good. Most of the results we've seen are 1 star or half star. And he says, yeah, some things didn't work out well. Well, we have a couple of papers we would like you to look over. We would like you to sign. And you know what that's going to be. That's going to say, in effect, I, Richard of Bordeaux. Isn't that rude? I mean, if you've been king, your majesty, and all that, now you're Sir Richard of Bordeaux. At least you're a sir. You're not a peasant, but Sir Richard, that's basically saying, let's beat that breast. I'm unworthy because I've been lousy. I need to give up the throne because I'm so unworthy. So they got that out of him. And in that way, Henry Bolingbroke, the eldest son of John of Gaunt, now announced that there was an empty throne. He announced it to a parliament. He brings, oh, get this is so neat. He basically brings a proclamation from the Tower of London, say, guess what I have? I just talked to King Richard, and he asked for you all to meet. You see, that was the law. The king has to summons a parliament. And I have the official document. And nobody's going, yeah, we want to look at that. Yeah, nobody's going to say that. You're going to, oh, neat. So, yeah, it's right here. And he wanted you all to meet. He was so sorry he had to miss seeing you all. But he wanted me, as his cousin, to say hi to you all. And it was great that you all could meet. And I have something sad to tell you. He has decided that he can't be king anymore. Yeah, but he loves you very much. Yeah. And they are, you say, but would anybody stand up and say, are you really being truthful? No, I think everybody understands what's going on. We've got to have a vacancy. We can arrange that. Dieting will do that. And we can also then announce that since there is a vacancy, I wonder if there's anybody who could be king now. Sir, dark horse? I don't think so. I think it's a very light horse. I mean, it's pretty obvious. And that's how he becomes king. There is the supposed coronation. You say, there's the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Archbishop of York. Did they know what was going on? Oh, I definitely suspect so. I don't think this is some surprise that they understood. See, Richard II had no heir, so it was pretty clear for the purpose of succession that throne was going to be available. Richard had been transferred from the Tower of London to a castle up in Northumbria near the Scottish border. And there, it appears that he might have been able to remain, albeit on very poor rations. But I think there were some pro-Richard demonstrations. And that can be very annoying. I mean, if you're a Henry person, I don't think this is a good time to be a pro-Henry. I mean, but the Henry people thinking about a demonstration saying, bring back Richard. We love Dickie. You know, that kind of, no, not good to be pro Richard. And it particularly was not good for Richard because presumably he was either killed or starved to death, whatever, there at Pontefract Castle, which you can still see, I understand, way up north. The Melancholia thing, that was simply passed out by the press, you know, the Royal Press Association, Henry IV's office. I don't think we would say, sir, can we see evidence of that? I don't think there's any of that. I'm sure many people thought it. Sure. Seems a little convenient, but melancholy will get you every time. I mean, worse than a head cold. Yeah. So all of that, because you don't want those demonstrations anymore. You know, you maybe have a memorial service and say, gosh, we loved him. But we do not want, as long as he's that air, carbon dioxide, yeah, we do not want that to go on. So it doesn't. And that's the end of that. Certainly by the early part of 1400, if not before. Shakespeare. Or is it Showtime or HBO? I always, 2013, I would not have known that was Jeremy Irons if what they can do with makeup, right? But I thought of that quotation from Shakespeare, and I thought, boy, is that the truth. Yeah. I mean, it sounds, power is very, quite the aphrodisiac, I suppose. But it probably keeps you up nights. So I just thought that was very cute. And if you've ever seen the Hollow Crown, did any of you ever see that series? I didn't either. But it was, obviously, if they had enough money to hire Jeremy Irons, I guess they had plenty of money. So it probably was a very interesting series. And not just a Shakespeare business. I think it was with all of the extras that we expect from these historical dramas that we've seen. Now, when we say Lancastrian lands, there's nothing like a map, is there? I mean, when we think about all of the lands they had, you just go yourselves and see it. All these lands that you see colored, and I'll see where it says Lancaster, this is just part of it. And what that means is John of Gaunt, he married well. Wife number one was the heiress to Lancaster. And she was the female heir. So you know what that means, John of Gaunt becomes Duke of Lancaster. You say, well, so what? Well, what is that he's going to rule over all of this as do his heirs. And with that comes wealth and military force, which will be in many ways larger than the royal forces. Now we see it in terms, look at all that. You see all that north and the red, and you're thinking, John of Gaunt passes on to Henry a lot, all the land with the army. And think of all those folks who are working and doing all of that. It's amazing when you think of all that Lancastrian land. And you say, well, it's not the kingdom. No, but it's a big chunk of it, isn't it? And why this is important is that it gives, I think, Henry a very nice basis if he had just kept that and not pressed to become king, it might have been better, but that's merely speculation on my part. I just want you to be aware when I look at that and I think of all of these lands that were held. And see, that's right next to Scotland. And that will be very important because let's face it, Wales and Scotland, Ireland are all going to be very important. Now, we said about crowns being uneasy when one becomes a king. Oh, not at first. At first, everybody loves you. Yeah, you know, that kind of thing. And Henry, oh, Henry, we were hoping you would be king. You'll never know how much we love you. Yeah, folks will tell you that. But then things change. And why do they change? Because you know what they're saying behind your back, and it hurts. They start using the U word. And you say, a U word? Usurper. Maybe quietly, not loud enough for you to hear. But as you walk in a room, you hear it being muttered. Usurper. And why do they do this? I'll tell you exactly why. Thought you'd never ask. Because they had supported him. And you can never get people like that happy. They want more and more and more. You can't say, oh, aren't you satisfied? Oh, yeah, it's wonderful. And you know why? Because you make it so. Now, there are no sycophant like that in the world who's going to deal with people that way. So Henry is not able to satisfy all those people who were quite happy to help him at one point because they thought they were going to get this, that, and the other. But then once you're in, they're going to say, what about us? Well, we won't be involved in the payoff or whatever you want to call it. But I thought these particular statues and this Owen Glendower was particularly important, this Welsh individual, because Henry IV had already made his son, whom we will hear about in a couple of weeks, Prince of Wales. Now, that title has been held by English since the 13th century. But those Welsh, I don't know if they always liked that. Yeah, I mean, and Owen Glendower were among them. The story of Wales in England is an interesting one, isn't it? As far as that's concerned, Owen Glendower was an individual. I won't attempt the Welsh spelling so I'm going the easy way of doing the English spelling, but Glendower was a Shakespearean character too. Will have a very important role in saying, we feel betrayed. You've hurt us because go Wales, and yet we loved you, and yet you treated us this way. And now we're going to find other people, nobody more than him. I found that. It's like a bobblehead, isn't it? This was the famous Hotspur. Yes, Lord, we all remember that from Shakespeare class, right? And he would, gosh, how many of those, what do they call them? Those military, they put on the great reviews. And I'll bet you there's one with him because he died young, but he had quite a career. Yeah, parade. His father was Duke of Northumberland. And he does look young, and he was. And he died young. And he had, I guess, a great future. You know what they say, die young and leave a beautiful corpse. I guess. I know that's kind of sad, isn't it? It was like he never got to be Duke himself. But Hotspur and his father, truth be told, they had fought against the Scots on behalf of Richard II, and he and Henry IV came, basically part of the package. And Henry basically did not fulfill what the Percys, Henry Percy and his father, thought they were entitled to. So believe it or not, old Hotspur ended up allying with Owen Glendow. And you think, what's a guy from Northumbria doing with the Welshmen? Well, that's war, isn't it? So he is part of that little coalition. And then the strangest one of all, welcome to the Mortimers. Lord, they are the most confusing. It's like trying to figure out Smith and Jones in this country. There are more Mortimers. And if you ever go and look up English Mortimers, you got a weekend. You won't have time for South Alabama. You'll be so busy on Wikipedia. There are more Mortimers. They are intermarried with the royal family, as a result of which one of them is married to Edward III's daughter. So as a result, these Mortimers will get into, what do we call it, the royal race. And they actually have a better claim to the throne than does Henry.
Absolutely.
But nobody will talk about it at first. But as time goes on, it's like, should Henry have actually been the king? It's really up to the Mortimers. If some of you are looking at it and saying this is very confusing, it is very confusing. And the reason is the claimant, who would be basically the great-grandson of the originators, was basically being sponsored by his uncle. And that partially what makes sense his father had died. So the little fella was just 9, and eventually these folks will be taken, what do they call that? Protective custody. Well, you watch all the television, police shows. So we know about protective custody. You may not be coming out. Yeah. There may not be any probation where you're going. So all of these Mortimers then get in on this. And again, I don't know how sincere they are about the claims so much as they are simply interested in seeing what opportunities will go ahead. And that's the Mortimers. Because again, like you said, they are truly have a better claim. But when you're looking, and you think Henry IV must have really been made, I would say, irritated, nervous. And you say, I wish I had just stayed in France, sometimes in Paris, and because there was something going on all the time and it wasn't good. Because if you're a usurper, you don't have anyone to blame except yourself. Remember, you did this. You didn't have to take Richard's throne, but you did, and now you're paying the price. I just love that. That's called Shrewsbury, the major battle. Have any of you all been there? I thought that was so pretty. They picked a real nice day for the photograph, didn't they? Near Wales. So it's way over there. Way over us. I'm like, yeah, you got to be in London to be in the cool kids. But that's a nice part of England too. I think it's a small town, say 30,000. But it's a tourist site. T-shirts, mugs, and all other kinds of things are available. And probably online. Look up Shrewsbury in Shropshire. Remember the Shropshire lad? We had to read that in literature class. In any event, Henry IV, along with his son, dear old Prince Henry, with their army, they were able to defeat Hotspur and the various allies. So this was a major battle and a major victory for the king. That was, as you see, 1403. Not that the conflict was over, far from it. These conflicts, particularly with Hotspur's father and others, will go on. Because this is way up there in Northumbria, that beautiful area where we love the sheep, as you know. You lots and lots of sheep. But now I've got to tell you something that will be very distressing. It's about the Scropes. Now, again, luckily for you, this is no Shakespeare class, so you don't have to learn all this, but they're very important because they are allied with the Percy. And you say, why are the Percy so big? Well, they're like John of Gaunt and that Lancastrian land, because they are the #1 people in the area. And this Scrope family, SCROPE, are basically one of their major supporters in the area. You know, where they're not little people, they're big people. I bring that to your attention because of Richard, who is pictured here, not kneeling, but on the throne. And it's an archiepiscopal throne. You say, what's a nice guy like you being on an episcopal throne? Well, I'll tell you exactly why, because the older brothers had gotten the positions as laymen. When we're passing out these rights, you don't look at the boys and say, all right, who's into chastity? And then somebody gonna say, I want to, let me. No. But that's how Richard gets to go all the way up the ranks. I guess it's also true he loved administration. Now, not everyone out there, when I say Episcopal administration, is going to say, oh, please, can I read a book about that? I had a fantasy about that, a student saying that to me. I want to read a book on that subject, but it hadn't happened. Okay. But the idea is he was quite a good administrator. He had probably had some experience in Avignon. a city or town, whatever, we know today. And then he was part of this great family. He had been, I think, Bishop of Coventry, worked his way up, become Archbishop of York. And you say, oh, I'm so glad. There's nothing like being promoted and so forth. But he made a very, very bad mistake. I was going to say boo-boo, but it's too big for boo-boo. This is a serious error because what he did was take his family over the church. And you say, well, that's a very difficult. I agree. It's a big choice. But in choosing his family, the Scropes, the Percys, over the church, he had what I would call the dubious honor of being beheaded as a traitor by Henry IV's government. You say, oh no, it's another Thomas à Becket. Why isn't Richard Burton playing him? Why? Because it's no fault of MGM or any of the other big studios. The church let it pass. There were some people who might have said, yeah, I really wish they hadn't chopped off his head. But, what is there say? Let bygones be bygones. We can all be friends. I don't know. That is so weird to me. Chop off the head of the Archbishop of York. I just think that's rude. But obviously it was significant, and it was significant because of the fact that the church, well, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury said that was, I don't think you said very naughty, but you'd say, I wish you hadn't done that. But it's not going to be like Henry II Becket. Part of it has to do, and some of you will remember that this is a time of two popes. And the Pope in Rome, which depends on English support, is not going to say, you're in a heap of trouble. He's going to say, let's move on. Let's all hope for the best. I know things are going to work out. I love you very much. That kind of thing. So, yeah, Urban VI. So, all of that is to say that we say goodbye to an Archbishop of York and thinking these folks in the future will not go against the church or indeed the crown because your brothers or your dad ask for your help. As far as France is concerned, it's not pretty. Remember, during the time of Richard II, the lands had virtually disappeared that were held by the English. But there was a little here, perhaps, and way up there, a place we all know, the port city of Calais. And all of this is to say, do I, as Henry IV, some call me a usurper, I call me a person who loves England very much. But whatever title you want to call yourself, do I need to get this going again, this war for French territory? And the answer is I don't think so. I think instead, it can't always be June, but it does seem like these folks are always getting married, doesn't it? So, yes, it's time for another one. And how do they keep having a fresh supply of daughters? Well, that's because of Charles VI of France, and more of him later. But he has a number of daughters. Remember, one had been married briefly to Richard II. You remember, she was just a little thing. And she went back home when she was 9 or 10. To have time for braces and, getting ready for school. But yes, she went back home because she was now ex-queen. Because yet, I don't see any babies, so you're out of here. That's the way it worked. So that was the ex-queen of France, ex-queen of England, right? So now, believe it or not, the French and the English start planning on Henry marrying his son to a younger sister. And you're thinking to yourselves, or at least I hope you are, oh, sis, you'll love it. Maybe not the food, but there's so many great things going on in England. I mean, if you're a French princess, do you really? Whatever the case, this was another sister. A sister of the wife, sort of Richard II. So they start working on this marriage. I'm sure you know one of many reasons I could never be a diplomat. They start talking about negotiations. And I'm thinking that's worse than, that's better. So what are they negotiating? Well, of course. What's in it for us? You say, well, love, the blooming of love. No, we're talking dowry. We're talking how much? Or what's it worth to you? And all of this is most unfortunate at the time because the King of France is at the stage of recurrent madness. I don't know if they still call it madness, but they did at the old books. Just a mental illness of various types, which seemed to become worse as time went on. But it's going on, and guess what? His government has the very same problem that the English had. And that, of course, too many royal males. Too many royal males will lead, of course, to conflict. And in this case, to beautiful areas that probably in your trips to France you have visited. Here we have Burgundy and Orleans. Their dukes are younger brothers of Charles VI. And instead of demonstrating the spirit of fraternalism, shall we say, they are thinking, well, he's an idiot, and so I can take over. And this will go on endlessly, and this will definitely play into the possibility that Henry IV can settle this by his son being betrothed to this younger Valois daughter. And her name was Catherine, and she will have a very important role to play in our story. a very, very important story. Now, again, let me remind you that her older sister had gone back home. Don't worry, she's going to get married. So, yeah, there's no possibility of saying, "Oh, Dad, do you just want me to help you around here?" No, she's going to get a husband, but not as big as a king. She'll get a duke or something, but there'll have to be a dowry because let me point out, I don't think these dowries are on a sort of like a return basis. I mean, it's like, oh shoot, do we have to give it back? I don't think that's happening. So basically, especially if you're Richard II, yeah, I don't think that's leaving. But as far as this Valois family is concerned, with a crazed king, shall we say, and two major ducal families, putting France virtually at war at this time, nothing is going to happen. Nothing in the sense of a settlement, but there's not going to be war either. I would call it stalemate or armed truce, whatever you want to say. But that's, as they say, that will come up later. Nice picture, I think. Sometimes when we look at it, we might say, how do we know that's the real Henry IV? Well, we really don't. It could be his father. But it will do, say, late 20s, early 30s. Now, these folks didn't have the chance to get old. But basically, he seems to be quite the man in this particular picture. And of course, a la Shakespeare, he has those devoted sons. Remember Prince Hal? Oh, we love you, Dad. That day in June, we're just all over you. Yeah, because you are so great. However, have you ever heard somebody saying, I wonder if they would rather me not be around anymore? Yeah, that may be coming up. Daily Henry, and you're thinking, but he's not old. He's older than them. Remember, you're saying, gosh, really? If he was 50, I'd be surprised. But he was an unfortunate, as your book, if you do get to read this, was sad. He becomes, if you ever get with somebody and said, well, you think you're sick. Well, you hear about some of my diseases. I mean, yeah, I know that happens. We hear about that with sit around and have a Medicare. Yeah. Hypochondria. Yeah. But you say, you think you're sick. Well, you hear about me. Yeah, I mean, it's like comparing diseases. Nice. Fun group. Yeah. But that's what happens to the king. And apparently, many people thought, you'll love this, it's so biblical. He had leprosy. But that was real big, in the Bible. Remember the Bible. And now they're saying it's eczema. Eczema. Yeah. So I'm going to talk to my dermatologist and see if he can. I'm just thinking that would be terrible for poor Henry. But, as they say on the ads, but wait, there's more. Yeah, so he had lots of diseases and he would be indisposed at times, as we say at the Met. And so young Hal And his brothers would say, "Oh, Dad, we hope you feel better." Maybe they all get a card and sign it all together. "Oh, we love you so much." Yeah, that works for a while. But what do they say after they leave Dad's room? Yeah, like a lot of our stories. Yeah, there's probably something sinister going on. We're not just hoping for his getting better. And it reaches a point that Hal will actually, or shall we just go in and call him Henry? The son will actually, after fighting for his father and supporting him, will want to basically, what would you say, make his father emeritus? And sort of like, I'm going to be in charge and you're not. Well, in fact, we know that conveniently, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it, in 1413, he finally died. I mean, he'd been sick. It's like not bad. Good. No, he seemed like he was perfect condition. Everything. No, 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 no. It was one of the cases in which it was done, as far as his doctors and others said. So that meant that his son, the more famous Prince King Henry, would now accede to authority. But before we do hit this new king, we're going to hear about people, and I don't mean this in an unkind way, heretics. And you say, "Oh, no, you mean they are around merry old England?" Well, in some quarters. Do you know any personally? Well, we may be prepared to out some of them. Yeah. So we will talk about that next time. And thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Appreciate y'all coming.